Okay, welcome to tonight's InStride Live. Thanks so much for being here. Tonight is all about MIPS, two parts. First is documentation in the note, and then after that we will have, I imagine, maybe dashboard or review. All right, Lisa, you ready?
All right. So I've got two patients on this test schedule. I've got one I will work up as a new patient, and then the second one is a established patient that I will pull the MIPS in from previous documentation. So the MA is actually going to access the patient from the office visits as normal by clicking on the patient. And once they work up the patient and get all the history, the MIPS is in the social history section. So we'll start by clicking on the social history. And we've got multiple options here on the left-hand side. The first thing that I like to do is start with the tobacco use. And we will hover over here for the tobacco use and smoking, and then go to the right under details and click. This is going to allow us to select if the patient is a current smoker, a former smoker, or a non-smoker. In this case, this patient is a smoker, and if your office desires, they can actually capture more information down here in the bottom. Otherwise, we'll just document that this patient is a current smoker, and on the bottom right-hand side, we're going to click the blue Save button. After a moment, we'll get a pop-up that this smart form information was saved, and we'll close. The next part I'll go to is the MIPS section. This is where the majority of the information is documented. I'm going to start with a fall risk screening here. I'm going to move to the right under my details and click. This is going to open up the information where I can ask the patient if they've had any falls with injury in the past year. And under the value section, you have a drop-down area that allows you to select yes or no. If they have had no falls, then that's completed, and you would click OK and move on to your next section. With this particular patient, they have had falls with injury in the past year. So then the MA would ask, have you had 2 or more falls in the past year? In this particular case, we'll go right back to the value area, click the drop down, and select yes. So for the MA, their portion is done. They will click OK. And this patient has a history of diabetes. And with any history of diabetes, we want to perform a diabetic foot exam. And this could go one of 2 ways. So you'll click under the details. There could be divisions that actually know that their provider is going to perform a neurological exam, and they can opt to click the drop down and select yes. And they also know their provider is going to do a footwear evaluation. Under the value, they will click the drop down and also click yes. There are some offices where the MA may not do this section, and the provider will actually go in and select this information. Either way, once we're done, we're going to click OK. And so far, we've got everything we need, but we need our BMI. So what we're going to have to do is grab the vitals. So I'm going to close out of this section. Now I'm going to scroll down a little bit and click my vital section. Weight and height is mandatory in order to calculate the BMI. For this patient, she is 175 pounds, and she is 67 inches. This gives us a BMI of 27.41. It's highlighted in red, indicating this is above the normal range of 18.5 to 25. Once I'm done with my vitals and any other that may be required by my division, I'm going to click the Vitals Taken button, and I'm going to close that out. I'm going to navigate back to the social history, and I'm going to go back into my MIPS, and I'm going to go over here to my BMI follow-up and click in my details area. So with this patient being above normal BMI follow-up, I'm going to click the drop-down button, and I'm going to select that the provider is most likely going to go in there and either recommend they follow a low-cal, low-fat diet. And there's an area over here where the provider can maybe add some notes. Maybe they want to refer back to their primary care doctor. Perhaps it's serious and they need a nutritionist or a bariatric provider. And you can check the little box if you would like to. It will still populate whether the box is checked or not. Once I'm done, I'm going to click OK. And I've got this information here. So as an MA, I've collected everything I need to collect. I'm going to click that my social history is verified, and I'm going to close the window. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to collect the flu and the pneumonia vaccine. I'm going to click here under immunizations. It's automatically going to default to today's immunizations. I'm going to click add. On this left-hand side, my selections for flu and pneumonia are already there for me. I'm going to click on the flu. I'm going to click that the vaccination was given in the past. If that patient knows their exact date, then you can actually click on the calendar and select that date that the flu shot was given, which would be the first quarter of the year or the last quarter of the year, aka flu season. So with this particular patient, we're going to say she got hers on February the 1st, and then we would click OK. If this patient does not know when they had gotten their flu shot, and let's say perhaps they had gotten it November, you can simply document November 2021 and click OK. And you will have patients that do not recall, but they know they got it. Either way, you would still click that the vaccination was given in the past. The patient does not recall, and you can click OK. I'm going to go back in, and I'm going to add my pneumonia vaccination. The pneumonia vaccination can be captured year-round as well as the flu, and it can be received any time of the year. So with this same form and fashion, we're going to click vaccination given in the past. If they have the exact date, we can put that in. Or we can simply say that, hey, they had this March 2022, and click OK. After that, I will click immunizations are verified. And I will close that. Current medications. So what you can do here is normal. You can search for them manually from the patient verbally giving you their medication list. Perhaps they've handed you something that's handwritten or typed up, or you can use your external RX history. In this case, this patient is verbally telling me what they're taking. And when I select that medication, it's automatically going to put T for taking. So we're going to select, they're also on ibuprofen, 200. And this patient is, wait a minute, I'm not taking that anymore. So we're going to discontinue it. We're going to click verified. This particular MIPS measure must be done every patient, every visit. I'm going to close that out, and in which case I would tell my provider this patient is ready. The provider's going to come in. He's going to go ahead.
I am so sorry to interrupt, or at least I do have a question in the social history about the.
Sure.
I believe this is a two-step process. So in the tobacco use, we have to notify that, yes, that they are a current smoker. But in the MIPS section, if you could click on that, I believe we also have to counsel them.
Yes. So that is, this is normally where the provider would actually go in. So we'll say this is turned over to the provider now. He will look at the note, and he will go in here, and the provider will check that they have told the patient, hey, you know, you really shouldn't be smoking with all these medications you're on, with all your issues. And then what they can do here is they will click on this area, and they will select the current date that they did tell the patient that they needed to quit smoking. There's also a second part where there could be an office that maybe they've prescribed Wellbutrin or something like that for the patient. Perhaps they've got some pamphlets. They know, a provider that, deals with quitting smoking. They could perhaps give them information on that and click under the notes here. Dr. Smith down the way handles this. Maybe they'll recommend that the patient goes to Dr. Smith. And then the provider will click OK. The provider will also take a risk or a look at the fall risk screening for this patient. So this patient has a history of fall, so this provider wants to do a fall risk assessment. So he will confirm with the patient that, yes, they've had 2 or more falls in the past year with injury or without injury. So this patient's kind of had some bumps and bruises, so we'll select that. The next thing is to actually do the assessment. Provider will click the drop down and click that he has performed it. If he has not performed it due to a medical reason, he would select this radio button and perhaps document in the notes area why it was not performed, or choose the latter option, that it was not performed and no reason specified. Perhaps the patient, refused. But this provider is going to perform. So this opens up, once you click this, it kind of opens up like Boolean options, to where you actually have the option of assessing medications with the patient. Perhaps the provider's viewed the medication and thinks, there could be side effects that could be contributing to falls. Perhaps there could be, trip hazards in the home. We've got vision assessment we can do. We can actually do postural blood pressure assessment, and then we can do a balanced gait assessment. So if the provider has options here, they can do one or more or all of these. So for this medication assessment, we'll click the drop down, and this provider will assess, are the medications this patient taking contributory to any falls? Maybe they're not. In this next area, the home fall hazard, perhaps, they're, have a lot of items in their home, a lot of furniture. They could do, talk with the patient about that, or perhaps inquire, about the, walking paths in the home. They could also refer for evaluation of home fall hazards. Perhaps they have a home health care nurse that can help assess. So with this patient, we're going to provide some counseling. The next is the vision assessment. That also is accessed from the drop-down. And this provider can actually, speak with the patient and kind of conclude, are they functioning well with their current vision? Maybe they're not. This is probably for internal medicine for the Snellen chart. Perhaps they're not functioning well with their vision. And this provider goes to the notes, and they say follow up with a doctor. Maybe they're behind on their, yearly visit. We also have a postural blood pressure assessment. Once again, the drop-down area. They could take their blood pressure while sitting and standing and see if perhaps when that patient does stand, if that blood pressure drops. And lastly, we have the balance and gait assessment. We'll click the drop-down area. We've got a couple of options here. So we can observe the patient transferring and walking, kind of get up and go. We've got the Berg balance. We've got a Tonetti. And then there's options for other areas here. Perhaps this patient needs to go to physical therapy. So for this patient, we observed transfer and walking and the get up and go test. So next is the plan of care. So this is what is the plan for this patient? Are we going to do anything? So we are going to document it. And this, when you do document it, it's asking what type of plan fall care are you going to perform? So maybe we've given them a handout for some stretching, some gait training, strength training. Maybe we're referring them to an exercise program, or we're referring to physical therapy, in which this case, we're going to give them a handout. Last but not least, we have an option for if the assessment was not performed. We had an office recently that had a patient that had dementia. So, and I don't believe they had anyone with them, so we can't be sure if that patient was 100% sure if they had fallen or not. So you can document a medical reason, which that will open up another area here, and you have lots of options why you did not perform the assessment. And if one of these options is not available, then we can actually go over here. I can spell dementia and put that in our notes as the reason we did not perform it. And once we're done, we would click OK. And that is it for the provider side, I do believe. All this information is going to populate into social history. Immunizations record has been reviewed and updated. You can actually go to the blue band, click on immunizations, and you can see that when this was documented. Especially if you have a patient that's coming back for their follow-up and you want a quick find to see, was the flu shot and pneumonia shot documented at last visit? So this is a quick way to find out if it was. For the tobacco use, that is for all patients 18 and above, once a year per patient. BMI is also once a year per patient. Fall risk screening is once a year per patient for 65 and up. Diabetic foot exam is for all patients 18 and up that have diabetes. Immunizations for the flu shot, that is 6 months and up if you see any pediatric patients. And then the pneumonia shot is for 65 and up. So you can actually look into their history on the right-hand side and see if that was gathered at the last visit. Current meds is every patient, every visit.
Lisa, I don't think I have once ever gone back into tobacco and added anything I have supposedly told them, nor have I ever gone back into MIPS and filled out all of those things. Perhaps that is an error on my part that I did not know I should have gone back to do that. And I apologize for asking, but I haven't been told that is coming up on any of my dashboards, so maybe we'll see that. But is all of that mandatory?
Hasn't happened, but a fall risk assessment must be performed.
Okay, so after I do fall risk assessment because the patient's asked and I verified it, what of the rest of that stuff is required?
So for the MIPS and here on the fall risk screening, You really just need to go and just perform the assessment.
Okay, so, but performing the assessment is more than just clicking hitting the drop down that says performed. You need to
Right.
do something. Now, if
Right.
I do that in the plan section of my note, but I don't check any more of those boxes or do any more of those drop downs or do anything in plan of care, do I still get credit for doing the MIPS, or must I fill out at least one of those assessment things and the plan of care or the not performed to get credit? I really need to know the absolute minimum that must be done so that my numerator increments with my denominator, because most of this, while generally important,
Mm-hmm.
is it is not the greatest use of my time. Most patients tell me no matter what. So I need to know what needs to be done so I can increment that numerator.
Okay. All right.
Lisa, this is Jen too. Based on what we were informed, if the patient selects yes, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they have had falls, that the plan of care is required in order to get the numerator value.
Correct.
Okay. Because my plan of care most of the time is going to be, great, here's your prescription for PT, and I can hit that in balance case assessment, send to PT, and plan of care as sent to PT, and I can do that. That's fine. I have not once done that. But I believe that our MAs, by following what was my understanding best practice, has entered performed into the assessment for every single one, and that's the extent of it. And I think that's going to come back to be a problem if we're audited. So we must complete all the way down through plan of care, doing assessment performed, picking one of those 5 choices,
Mm-hmm.
and the plan of care with the type in order to get credit.
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And same for tobacco. You need to go back in, right? Because you ask one question, and then there were 2 things that the provider had to do. The MIPS one we just talked about, and then
Mm-hmm.
the provider needs to go back in and do something here.
Yes. So you would tell the patient, hey, you really need to quit smoking.
And that's required. It's not, because I was under the impression the measure was smoker, non-smoker, and boom, you get credit. But that is not true.
Right. Because this blue S is the structured data, and that's from where the MIPS are pulled.
Gotcha.
Yes, it is very much so a 2 point, 2 points for MIPS, 1 under the tobacco use that she showed you, documenting that either they do or not. And then under the MIPS section, in order to get credit for all of it, you do have to do that follow-up with the patient, documenting that you counseled them.
Got it.
Hey, this is Leah again.
Hey.
I just had a question regarding the immunization. I know it has to be like within the first quarter or the last quarter. My question is, does our office visit have to also be within the first quarter or the last quarter for it to count?
No, the patient just has to receive it within the first quarter or the last quarter for the flu.
Okay.
You could document it any time of the year.
Okay. So if I saw somebody today and they had their flu shot in October, it still counts. It doesn't matter that I'm not seeing that in October.
Right. Correct.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And of course, pneumonia shot is, you get it any time of the year, and also document that any time of the year.
Terrific. Thank you so much. All right, go ahead. I think you're going to do an established patient and show how much easier this is all going to be.
Once we get that in there, all right, this is my test patient. I am going to carry the meds forward since this is an established patient. I'm going to click into my current meds, and I'm going to confirm with this patient that they're taking these medications, and then I'm going to click verified. Afterwards, I'm going to go into my social history, And you can see the information's already there from last visit. So I will confirm with the patient they are still smoking. This has a little bit more information in it than is required. So I'll go ahead and confirm that with the patient, click Save, and get my confirmation here up top. And then I'm going to go into my MIPS section. And looks like they were counseled 1 month ago on quitting. This particular patient, it is normal BMI. So when they're normal, we just click yes. Fall risk screening. Still got the same information in there. And I'm going to ask this, just go ahead and pull this in there for that patient. Because it's only once a year, it's already been collected. And this patient's also diabetic. They had everything performed last time, so they're good to go. And I'm going to click Social History Verified. Close it, and it will populate everything into the note from their previous visit. So once it's added into social history, it will save everything for you.
I have two questions before you go on. The tobacco use, if it had said yes, do you need to reopen that form and close it again to get credit? Or if it says yes, patient says yes, do you need to do anything?
You don't need to do anything. I just opened it just to show it had more information.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my other question is the diabetic foot exam. So if this particular note gets audited, it says lower extremity neurological exam performed, yes. Footwear evaluation performed, yes. But you pulled that forward from a previous visit. If I don't do it again, that visit, is that a problem? That patient comes as a new patient, or in your office, somehow, some way, you and your provider know when it was performed, just put the date next to yes in that social history question. Just put the date it was performed. Put the yes,
Okay.
put the date. Then you can pull those forward visit by visit, and then know you can look and say, oh, look, there's my lower extremity exam performed, and I did that in February, so I don't need to worry about doing that, because some of those visits were routine care visits, which typically don't require MIPS. I don't know if that's still true, but at least it used to be only with office visits. So I think it would be a great idea to add that date, because then you could see at a glance when it was done, and you can always pull that information forward, and it'll have the date when you performed both the footwear and the lower extremity. Because you know what I do is I document it every freaking time now. Every time I document what shoes they're wearing and whether they have protective sensation, and I think I'd love to not document it every time.
Right.
Cool.
And if we have the information here on the right-hand panel, we can actually just import it.
Terrific. Now that would not import the diabetic exam, because for some reason that doesn't show there, does it? Oh, there it is. There it is. Now it's there because you was added. Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, because this is the new visit.
So instead of even opening up social history, you can just click that arrow, and pretty much that, your medicines, and you double check your immunizations, and that's it for MIPS on an established patient.
Yep. And for
Fantastic.
this patient, we can look at the top, and they see they've had quite a few immunizations. So I've already captured it for this year, so I don't even have to go to that section. Do you want me to schedule another appointment and then import this information?
Yeah. Yes, I think that would be great if you would do another established patient, since I completely derailed you. But yes, that would be terrific. Thank you so much.
All right, we've got a clean note. It brings everything in. There's my date.
That's terrific. So one click does 2/3 of your MIPS, and then do you so the medicines is every time, so you would do those.
Yes, correct. Verify these meds with this patient. Confirm they're still taking them. Maybe discontinue one. Click verified. And then I can look up top here at my immunizations and see that I don't need to document these.
And for follow-ups, if, for example, you looked that immunizations weren't done, then you do it the exact same way you would have done it as if the way you showed for a new patient.
Absolutely, yes.
Nothing different because it's a follow-up.
Yeah. And it still goes to today's, and I would still click add. And it would look like nothing's ever been documented because it would be almost like a new record.
And so really then the only time you need to click that immunizations verified box is the time that year you add those immunizations.
Correct.
So maybe you saw them in the summer and you see them again in the fall and, oh, hey, by the way, I had my flu shot. So you certainly may want to ask, but really once you've added those and immunizations verified, even if you miss it for the rest of the year, it's a once a year deal.
It is once a year, yes, sir.
Terrific. All right. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'd
like to move on to Jen's part.
Okay, guys. What I'm going to cover tonight is going into your MIPS dashboard. Your left-hand chart panel from your home screen under the cheeseburger, you'll find MIPS under Analytics. I favorited mine, which now shows up here. Staff members, office members, anybody that is assigned just from an office level, we know who your office managers are. We've asked, who reviews your MIPS. So the central office assigns certain staff for, the provider that they can review, because you're not going to want everyone in this dashboard. The first thing you would hover over here is this down arrow under quality, select it, and then select your year. In this case, this staff member, which I'm using a test staff user, was assigned to Dr. Hodos. So you simply select OK. If that staff member has more than one doctor at their office, more doctors are going to show up. All right, in here you're going to see all of your measures listed all the way down. And as we mentioned before, that smoking is kind of a three-part section, so it shows up 3 times. You have a denominator, which is in every measure what patients should have had this information collected. Your numerator shows anything that was collected. And over here in this section is things that need to be fixed. You can get into each one of these just simply by clicking on it. It will take you in. Right now we're in the 110 as far as the influenza immunization. I suggest to everybody here under the status bar to change that to data missing. That will bring to the forefront any chart numbers or patient account numbers that you need to review. It is very helpful to have 2 screens available if you're doing this one at a time. If not, you can download this entire report to CSV. And if you can see my whole screen, you can see that this was downloaded at the bottom left-hand side of your screen, which will pull up a report allowing you to look up externally. You can print it, save it, put it on another screen. When you open this, it is organized by the measure, the fact that it is missing, what measure, the description, and that patient account number. From this same screen, you do not have to go backwards. You can continue on with this drop-down arrow and go to each measure and do the exact same thing. Select the next measure, change it to data missing, and download your report. It would be much nicer if we could do all of them. Right now, the system does not function in the capacity where we can pull it all in one report. One of the things that I suggest is I've pulled up these patients' accounts. I know that this is for the 110 measure. I'm now in the 111. I can also download this. And this is going to be helpful, especially if you're tech savvy with Excel. You can open up everything you need, and I am a big fan of copy and paste. So I select this upward left-hand arrow, copy, and I'm going to pull up my other report, scroll down to the bottom, and paste. My apologies. Select all of your data for any missing information. Right-click copy. Go to your next sheet and paste. This is going to put all of you can do this with every single one of your measures. You can then go to the top of your screen because after you have all of your measures downloaded, select this upper corner, and at the top of your Excel spreadsheet, if you select data and then sort, you can sort that by the patient account number right here. Sort by account number, and this will organize your entire spreadsheet to say if the same patient is missing the 110, the 111, the 155, this will eliminate you from having to look up the same patient multiple times. Once you have your data organized in a way that's accessible to you or the way that you like to see it, you can then begin your patient search by utilizing a patient account number. So in the case here with test don't use, this patient, their account number is 298-600. You then would search that patient by account number. We now have test don't use. You would go to the progress note and begin searching using this function here. You can actually go through each progress note, and you'll have to look to see if that current medication was verified, if the social history was entered in on this progress note. If you review these progress notes and realize this information was not collected on XYZ date of service, this is going to require provider involvement. It is strongly recommended that you go back to your Excel spreadsheet and say, well, on this date, it was the 05/04/2022 date of service. Anyone reviewing these would then reach out to their provider and say, here's what I need. I need an addendum added. Anytime a provider is required to unlock a note, it is strongly recommended that they add an addendum, which essentially types right on the note why I unlocked this. It's very, very important for auditing purposes. They would do this by clicking addendum, typing in the reason, capturing medication for MIPS. They select save, and then you would hit unlock. Unfortunately, I'm under the test user, so the button isn't prevalent to say, now I'm going to unlock this note. At which point your MAs would then go in and capture the information, report back to the provider, whether it be your MA or your office managers or your clinical super users. When you have finished capturing the missing information, you can then ask that provider to relock the note. Every Friday, this MIPS dashboard is refreshed and new data is pulled in. So if you have captured everything that was missed previously, you'll see your numbers change over the weekend. It automatically updates. So these numbers will go down if you go back in and edit notes. We've had some, depending on what was missed, especially with your diabetics. If you didn't capture this information and you know that that patient is coming in 2 weeks, they've got a follow-up visit, or you can enter global alerts for a patient. If you enter that global alert, it'll show up in the right-hand chart side that says capture measure 126 and 127 as far as the neurological exam or the evaluation of footwear. So if you don't want to go and unlock a bunch of notes, when you're reviewing these patients' chart, you can see if they have a future appointment, add that global alert, and it shows right up on the progress note to alert your MAs. You know, in the case for test don't use, I can enter it right here. Neurological needed for MIPS on 05/26 appointment. You can timestamp that, hit OK. That will show up under that global alerts on that future appointment.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jen. I think I think that alert you put in went into a billing alert and not a global alert, which is why it didn't show up. But the global alert is certainly excellent.
You are 100% correct. To add a global alert, you select this button. You can select, you can type in, you can add a new one. Perhaps you just want to start from scratch, say MIPS, and then OK. You'll then have to select or get to where that is. These are not alphabetized. MIPS, you can edit it, grab fall risk. Select OK, close out, and then if you go back to your office visits, that will show up. Under the global alerts. You can also, when you do this, when you set in a global alert, you can also set it to expire. So if we want to go in and look at this, we can expire that the day after the appointment. Your MA is alerted on the right-hand side to go get that information so they know this is needed, but on the next appointment it's gone. So it's a good idea to get them to train their eyes to look over here if that's the workflow that you want to follow, because that alert will disappear if you expire it. But it's a nice way to say, hey, we need the fall risk. They'll go in, they'll do that assessment, provider can follow up, and then it expires the next day. It should fall off your list as long as you're following the workflow.
Terrific. Well, thank you all very much for being here. Appreciate the hard work that Jen and Lisa and Hannah, you guys put in. Thank you again so much.